Alright guys, Wes here, welcome back to the channel. So as you know, Ghost of Tsushima was one of the most acclaimed games of the 8th console generation, and I've actually said before that I think it was the best PlayStation 4 exclusive, and I still stand by that. It's been long rumored that an official sequel to Ghost of Tsushima has quietly been in development for years now, and Sony is simply waiting for the opportune time to confirm it, likely to make sure that the game is as good as the first one. But with that in mind, we're going to talk about the big reveal for Ghost of Tsushima 2. We're also going to talk about how huge the open world will be, what new characters we could see introduced, and how will the gameplay evolve from the first game to the eventual sequel. Real quick guys, don't forget to enter my 150,000 subscriber giveaway. It's super easy to enter. All you have to do is subscribe to the channel, comment your Twitter handle, tweet me proof that you're subscribed. The full details are in the pinned comment. We've got a lot to talk about as well, so check the video chapters for easy viewing, and let's get into it. So if it's not clear already, one of the best aspects of the original Ghost of Tsushima was the gameplay. It featured an incredibly addicting gameplay system in which your choices actually mattered. It took everything that we knew about open world hack and slash games, threw it out the window, and gave us the definitive experience that had meaning, depth, and a beauty to it. From the addicting main quest to the various combat stances that required thought, to precision shots with the bow and arrow, exhilarating stealth gameplay, to traversing the open world with a horse and a grappling hook, the amount of things that the original game did right, like the list can go on and on. But the main thing that I've been thinking about a lot is how could Sucker Punch improve on all of these points and more in the sequel. So there's a few places where Sucker Punch could take Ghost of Tsushima and kind of bring it to that next level, one of which being the amount of verticality at your disposal. Ghost of Tsushima 1 was very much a grounded game, with most of the verticality being jumping up on top of buildings, but the vertical combat was very much just using the bow and arrow and the other tools at your disposal. So while you could take the high ground against enemies in the first game, it was usually for a quick sneak attack, and then the rest of the combat was on equal footing. But what if for the sequel they deepened the climbing mechanics, allowing you to use the map to your advantage in new ways, like quickly climbing up and down trees or being able to return to vantage points after silently taking down an enemy, which would allow you to easily avoid other enemies noticing you and charging straight at you. Adding more verticality to the game could go a long way for both aggressive and stealthy players, and Sucker Punch should definitely be thinking about that for the sequel. But I think that really all comes down to how large the next game will be in terms of some of the points of interest. Now there's another thing that's been a bit played out as of lately, but having a hang glider to traverse the open world like Breath of the Wild does, or like in the upcoming Rise of the Ronin, would be a nice touch. Honestly, there was a few points in my first playthrough of Ghost of Tsushima 1 where I jumped off a ledge and just expected to pull out my glider like it was Breath of the Wild, but I'm a Zelda player, so that's probably why I felt like that. Now Ghost of Tsushima 1 had some pretty solid side quests. They weren't the greatest, but I do think that's one of the biggest improvements that we will see with the sequel. I just think they could be done a bit better. Like the first game side quests were pretty bare bones and could get repetitive, but I think a lot of that had to do with the time constraints. The main focus of the video game should always be on the main quest, but giving more depth and thought to the side quests will help, I think. It'll make the game feel a lot more immersive and alive, which I guess speaking of that, the NPCs could also use a little fleshing out, since Ghost of Tsushima 1's NPCs would often just stand in place and not really engage much with what was going around them. But according to some job listings at Sucker Punch a while back, a lot of effort has been made into revamping the NPCs for the next game, so I'm expecting Ghost of Tsushima 2 to have much more interaction, as again the NPCs were kind of just there, like they were in a strong suit. But again, it comes back to time, also budget, but as I said, that job listing does seem to suggest that they are improving on that aspect. Now Ghost of Tsushima had one very important choice for the player to make at the end of the story, but there was not a whole lot of true story driven player choice beyond that. Making the sequel more dependent on the player's actions could be a great way to heighten the stakes and make the experience feel more emotionally impactful, which that leads me to my next point. Ghost of Tsushima doesn't have much in-game content once you make the final choice in the main story. As a potential fix to this, they could always add more RPG elements to stretch the lifespan of a playthrough once you finish the main story, and maybe even add some kind of dungeon mechanic where certain areas of the map are super tough to survive in, which I guess would be a nice way to add some easy content to the next game, and also give more people opportunities to engage with Sucker Punch's excellent combat design. I mean, really, after the main story and once you beat all the side quests, really all there is just exploration, some mini games. There was also the cooperative multiplayer mode Legends that I think should definitely be expanded upon for the next game, as the addition of more supernatural elements was pretty solid. Now whenever it comes to the characters, there's been a ton of rumors floating around that Jin Sakai might not be the only protagonist in the sequel, as this next game could introduce an apprentice for Jin Sakai to teach, and then as the game progresses, they'll gradually become more powerful as they learn to fight more like their master. This could also be a really good thing for the side quests as well. Imagine one of your side quests is to like train an apprentice. There's also the fact that PlayStation has been doing a lot more half sequels as of lately, so Ghost of Tsushima 2 could set up a character whose story could be explored upon more with a second game. Now, there's a lot of things that the developers could do to make the game more impactful in terms of the story, and that is making the game more meaningful whenever it comes to killing or sparing enemy NPCs. Perhaps the factions in Ghost of Tsushima 2 could be morally gray. For me, that would make the story very interesting and possibly even alter the outcome based on the morality of the player character, as their actions or lack of action could lead to consequences. But by allowing you to either kill or spare basically any enemy could lead to some really interesting gameplay mechanics and story changes. I'm not saying that there should be like a morality meter like in Red Dead, but something even a little bit like that mechanic could be pretty cool to see. Now, when it comes to new characters that could potentially be introduced in the sequel, I already mentioned the apprentice for Jin, but another possibility is something similar to the upcoming Rise of the Ronin, where the main leaders of each faction are named characters. It's widely believed that Ghost of Tsushima 2 is going to take place during the second Mongol invasion of Japan, which took place in the year 1281 and was a much larger scale than the first invasion, which is what was taking place during the first Ghost of Tsushima game. But assuming this is where the sequel takes place, it's very possible that the commanders of each participating faction could play a role in the story, perhaps forming a relationship or rivalry with Jin as he's forced to participate in the conflict. Next up, let's talk about how huge the open world of Ghost of Tsushima 2 could be. The first game had an open world estimated to be roughly 11 square miles and had 2 islands. Assuming the sequel is going to cover the second Mongol invasion of Japan, that game map is likely going to have to expand to compensate a much larger scale of the conflict. Also, when compared to many other open world games of the PS5 generation, Ghost of Tsushima's map was relatively small, and that alone may end up being the motivator for Sucker Punch to add another island or 2 in addition to expanding upon the first game's islands. Now, there's also been rumors that we're going to go to mainland Japan, which I think would be cool, but only time will tell. Now, there's another thing that I'd love to see in this open world is more random encounters and possibly even adding mini bosses that almost take you surprised whenever you go up to an enemy and you notice, hey, this guy is a little bit stronger than I thought he would be, and it's just a full-on mini boss. The first game had incredible combat, and I'll take any excuse the game wants to give me for more of it. One of the highlights, and honestly the thing that I loved the most about Ghost of Tsushima, was the really unique map that would allow you to be guided to new objectives by the wind if you so choose to. I want the exploration of the next game to be basically the first one, but maybe on a grander scale, which honestly the best way to do that is to add some points of interest that are larger city locations. And I'm not saying like something on a grand scale, but something just like a more populated town, possibly the construction of a larger city that has multiple verticality options, and something to just change up the gameplay. If we end up going to mainland Japan, it would be easy for Sucker Punch to make some more NPC heavy areas to give the game some more variety. They could take influence from games like Assassin's Creed, allowing you to blend in with crowds, making it so that you're not detected. You could just kind of move silently as the ghost that you are. Next up, let's talk about the reveal date. Now, I've got a few theories. On one hand, Sony has been remaining tight-lipped about most of their first-party projects from PlayStation Studios, likely so they don't reveal the games too early and get people on their case for dangling the games over our heads like carrots for years at a time, like how Wolverine was announced 3 years ago and is apparently still another 2 to 3 years out, or perhaps The Last of Us Online Factions that was announced in 2019 and then unceremoniously was canceled 4 years later. With how much evidence there is supporting Ghost of Tsushima 2's existence, it's wild to believe that Sony is simply waiting for the opportune moment to reveal it. Now, it's hard to say when it's going to be revealed, obviously, because Sony is just keeping things pretty quiet. I'm really hoping that we get something at the summer showcase, maybe just a teaser for the story of Ghost of Tsushima 2, maybe even just announce that the project is alive and it's gonna happen. And it could very well be that Sucker Punch is working on something else right now, and they're gonna release that game before they release Ghost of Tsushima 2, but I don't think that's the case. Now, if we assume the game is coming within a year or two, I think there's also a good chance that it comes with a laundry list of PS5 Pro improvements. I don't know if Ghost of Tsushima 2 will launch alongside the PS5 Pro, but that could be a huge opportunity to increase early sales of the hardware. But even if Ghost 2 doesn't launch alongside that new version of the PS5, I'm sure it will be marketed as a PS5 Pro enhanced game, and Sony will likely bundle the two products together, similar to how they did God of War Ragnarok and the Spider-Man 2 bundles. But I'm expecting Ghost of Tsushima 2 to drop sometime in early 2025, probably 3 to 4 months after the PS5 Pro launches, which is supposed to be releasing sometime later this year, meaning Sony will hopefully announce the game this summer, perhaps during the PlayStation showcase, but again, only time will tell. But what do you guys think about all this? What are some features that you want to see from Ghost of Tsushima 2? Let me know your thoughts down in the comment section. Hit the subscribe button if you have not already, especially if you want to enter that big PS5 giveaway I'm doing. If you enjoyed the video, do me a favor and hit the like button. And until next time, this has been Wes, and I will talk to you guys in the next video.